Hey guys, this is the start of a series of videos for Excel tutorials to help you improve in Excel, obviously. Now, Excel is really useful, especially if you're in the finance industry or just basically any industry. It's a very useful tool to analyze data, and I recommend you learning it, and I'll help you through the way. So the first thing we want to do is equations. Okay, now. Alright, so say we have 3 and 4. Okay, let me just remove this. So 3 and 4. If I type 3 in there, it will just come out 3. If I type 4 in there, it will just come out 4. But now I want to do 3 plus 4. Okay, if I do this, it won't actually work. It will just say 3 plus 4. Okay, to actually form the equation, we need to have an equal sign before anything else. Alright, the first thing inside this cell has to be an equal sign. And now I can write 3 plus 4. Okay, now I have an equation or an expression, and it will give me 7. Alright, but say I wanted to reference, or I want this 3 and 4 to come from these cells, so I can change these cells. So we can treat these as variables. Okay, these cells we can treat as variables. So this one, B2, is a variable. A lot of the elite mathematicians will tell me you can't do that, but for simplicity, let's just treat these as variables. Okay, so one way we can do it is to type B2, okay, and it will automatically recognize that you were trying to get this cell. Then we do plus C2. The other way to get C2 is to press or click it, and we get 7. Now the good thing about this is we can actually change these cells to 5, and the cell which has referenced to our B2, the cell that we just changed, will also change along with it, which is a really useful thing when we think about having an equation and we want to put a lot of numbers into it. We want to see how numbers affect that equation. Okay, now that probably didn't make too much sense, but don't worry. Let's have a look. What else can we do? Okay, so instead of plus, we can do times. Now for times, you need to have an asterisk sign. Okay, normally, in maths we have a cross, but in Excel we have an asterisk sign. And in a lot of programming or a lot of computer programs, we use asterisk signs. So it's really crucial that you remember we use asterisk signs. B2 times C2, we should get 5 times 4 equals to 20. And there we get 20. We can also change this, and it'll change to 12. Okay, this asterisk sign is really crucial. Now, as a beginner, you'll probably make a lot of mistakes. You'll probably have B2 times C2 with an X in between, and you'll get an error. Okay, that's one way Excel shows error. Hash name, whatever. Yeah. Okay. Now, what else? Divide is just a forward slash. Okay, 3 divided by 4 is 0.75 or 3/4. To the power of, to the power of is this little hat sign. Okay, which is just shift 6. 3 to the power 4 should be 81. You get 81. Alright, and that's how we form equations. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is functions. Alright, so in Excel, we can form an equation for this, but there are also functions. So for example, if I had, say, all of this, and I wanted to find the sum of it. Okay, so I wanted to find the sum of all of this. Now I could do B2 plus B3 and so on all the way to B8. This will get extremely hard depending on the number of data points I have. If I had like 1,000, it would probably take you a long time to write out the equation. But luckily, Excel has functions to do all of this. So if I just type sum, I can say sum of B2 comma, B3, just following the directions of the guide, okay, comma, B4, comma, B5, comma, B6, comma. Okay, I can do this and it will give me the same. Okay, now I don't have to do pluses. But, I mean, you're going to ask me, that's not really that helpful. However, in Excel, after you do a sum, it also recognizes a range. Instead of putting every single reference cell into this, we can put a range of cells, and it will just sum all of this, which is really useful. Okay, and you also get 26. So that there is a function. Alright, functions usually begin with a word representing the type of functions, and inside you can put the parameters or the variables if you don't know what parameters. Oh, okay, so if you go to formulas, in your formulas tab, if you're using 07, you can find a list of all the functions. You got trig, you got all of this. I don't even know what some of these functions do. Okay, let's say we wanted to do trig. All right. So say we wanted to find the sine of 0.5. Okay, so I mean, if we didn't have functions, we would have to do this from first principles. We'd have to actually work out how sine works with multiplication, with division, and we'd have to actually write out the whole thing. Yeah, but inside we already have pre-made functions. So it's just sin, which is representative of sine, 0.5, and you get 0.47. Okay, so that's sine of 0.5. Now notice, after I write the sine, this comes up. Let me just write it again. Okay, this comes up. This is the list of functions. It's kind of like Google. You search something and a whole list comes down. This is Excel recognizing, oh, you want something like this? Okay, pick one if you forget the name. So this is really useful. Alright, and that's just functions. Functions is really useful. Another really useful function, average. Okay, so average, maybe it's spelled all of average, or maybe it's AVG. I don't remember. Let's have a try. It's definitely not AVG. I mean, I wrote AVG. Average is actually spelled all out. So we can actually just click on it, and then average will come out. Now, after you type the average or click the average, this help thing comes down, and this shows you how you can input the function or put parameters into the function. So this number 1, which is bold, means this has to be in there. If I didn't put anything, that would be an error, right? Because I just type average of nothing. That doesn't make sense to the computer. Okay, so I can put one letter, and the average of one thing is just itself, so that will give me 3. Now back to this, it says number 1, number 2, ... meaning that I can go to number 5, number 6, number 7. That just means I can put as many numbers as I want into this, and the square brackets just mean these are optional parameters, so you don't actually have to put these into if you don't want to, but this one you definitely need to have. Okay, now before just then I said you can put as many numbers as you want to, but you really can't, because there's a limit to how big Excel goes. But you'll generally not reach up to the limit anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, apart from numbers or each reference, I can also just highlight the range like I did before with sum, and it'll find me the average of all of this, which is 3.714. Oh, it's very interesting. Okay, okay, so that's just functions. Alright, the next thing is autofill. Now, autofill is really useful. Alright, you're gonna love autofill. I'm just gonna delete all of this first. So, okay, so say this is how many thousands your friend earns, or your parents earn a week. Okay, wage. I'll call this wage in thousands. Alright, we can expand these cells if it doesn't fit to make it fit. And say this is after tax, or the tax paid. Say the tax rate for simplicity is just 30%. Okay, so to find the tax paid is just 30 times this, right? And we just, for simplicity, we'll put this as thousands as well. Make this bigger. Okay, so let's see how much tax we pay. Alright, so this one is just B2 times 0.3, which is 30%. Okay. And now we're going to have to calculate this B3 times 30%. We're going to do this for every one of them. But notice how we follow a pattern. We actually do the same thing for every one of them, except we have different numbers on this side. Excel also recognizes that. So what you can actually do is you can click on the cell that you have with the formula inside. You need to have a formula for this, and you can click here, and you see how it's gray now. That will actually follow the same formula through for all of them, which is interesting. Okay, this will become really useful. Alright, so yeah. Now, one of the things I really like people to do is to have all the variables or all the things named inside cells, so you can change them later. So my tax rate, I'm going to write it as 0.3. I'm going to keep it here. Okay, and instead of writing 0.3 for it, I'm going to say B2 times F1. Okay, and that's going to give me the same thing. Now, the question is, can I autofill it? It doesn't work. Why is that? Let's have a look. Okay, so that's B3 times B2. We can actually go to formulas and then trace dependence. Sorry, trace precedence. Alright, and it will show where these references come from. So this is coming from this cell. And this cell. Oh, that's interesting. Let me just remove the arrows. So what it's actually doing is, it's coming from this cell. When I drag it down, it's also dragging this list down. So one way we can change this is, we can also autofill this. If we just autofill that without putting an equation, it will just do 0.3 in all of them. Okay, and then see how it works now, because this comes from this cell and comes from this cell. That's how autofill works. It changes the reference. When you autofill downwards, your references change downwards as well. If you autofill sideways, your references will change sideways. I'll show you that just in a sec. Okay, but I don't really like this, so what can we do? Alright, now this is really just getting into the next step, which is absolute and relative references. Okay, so what do I mean by absolute and relative references? So this is a relative reference. Why is that? Because when I drag it down, all of this will change as well. Okay, so it's relative to the position where you are at. But I don't want this to change, I want this to stay as, this cell. So then I can use it for all of them. So what do I do here? Well, I put dollar signs in front of them, in front of the letter and the number, and now this will become an absolute cell. Alright, so when I drag this down, it will follow this same cell. So sometimes, you might have gone to Excel and you might have seen, oh, why do they have these dollar signs? So now you know what these dollar signs mean. Okay, now let's drag it down and see if it works. Voila, it works. That's good. Okay, so now some of you are probably wondering, if you're just dragging it down one side, you probably don't need the dollar sign in front of the F, because you're only changing the row number, you're not actually changing the column letters. So what we can do is we can just take off the dollar sign in front of the F and drag it down, and it works because we're just changing the row numbers when we drag it down. The letters are not actually changing. Okay, So let's just go back a bit and talk about autofilling sideways, because I want people to know that you can autofill both ways, not just downwards. So say I wanted to do this, or this times the tax rate. Okay, don't forget I need the asterisk. That gives me 0.9. Now just notice that these are not the same. Okay, so I can drag it sideways. Now it also gives me 0 because this is coming from these. When I drag it sideways, this comes from here, this comes from here, this one comes from here and here. So when I get to this, it will come from here and here. So here and here. And when I get to this, it will come from here and here. So I want to use an absolute referencing for this one. Do I put it in front of the 1 or in front of the F? If you said F, you're correct, because we're dragging it sideways and we don't want the letters to change. Now you can put the $sign in front of the 1 if you want to as well, if you don't really get what I'm talking about for absolute and referencing, and it works, right? It comes from this, this, this. Okay, and that's pretty much it on what we had today. Let's recap. We learned how to do equations, how to do functions, how to do autofill, and absolute and relative references. Okay, thank you guys for watching, and hopefully you learned something.